what's up? It's great to see everybody back here at Babylon Talmud. Today we're learning Daf Tzadi Hey of Masechta Shabbis, Daf 95. It's a cool daf. Let's see. I don't think it's as crazy as like the last few days, but of course it gets into Tumah and Tara, which is always fun. Let's do an overview before we begin. The page begins with like makeup-y kinds of things, like makeup, like stuff that you put on your face. I guess I'll be able to show off my knowledge of makeup. You're all going to be very impressed, I'm sure. What else? Random-y kind of things, okay? Like just random stuff. You'll find out about that. Then we get into planters, right? If you have like stuff planted in a pot, and then you remove the stuff from the pot, we have to be thinking about uprooting things if they're in a pot. Is it like you're uprooting it from the ground? Then we're going to get a little bit into a little bit of Tumah and Tara at the end. Friends, let's get started. We're on Daf Tzadi Daled Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. V'chein hagodeles chulei. Okay, so it says the Gemara, godeles kocheletz ufokeses mishumai mechayva. So, if a woman is braiding her hair, or if she is putting on eyeshadow, or so I believe that this is blush. The Rashi gives like 2 explanations. One of them is like, I don't know. So the Sefaria goes with the blush explanation. The Art Scroll goes with like the some kind of fixing of your hair kind of thing. Personally, I don't. Oh, there's a cat here. That's very nice. Oh, he's looking at me, trying to figure out what he wants to do. All right, and he's gone. All right. I just hope that that's not the cat that's been using my stairway as a bathroom. Or if it is, hopefully, we don't need to get into this. All right, let's move on. So anyways, I don't know. I don't really know what fixing hair is. That sounds a little vague, so I went with blush. But then again, I don't understand how that makes sense either. These are very technical things. I don't really know. Let's just learn the Gemara. So fine. Mishumai mechayva. So somebody who does these things, what are you chayiv for? Amr Rabbi Avin, Amr Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina. So it says Rabbi Avin in the name of Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina. Godeles mishum oreges. So if a woman braids her hair, the reason why I say woman is because godeles is female, but I assume that the same would apply if a man had longer hair and would do this as well. So she would be chayeves for weaving, for braiding her hair would be chayeves for weaving. Kocheles mishum koseves. When she puts on eyeshadow, she will be chayev for writing, because I guess I looked this up. So when you put on eyeshadow, you use like one of those brushes, I guess. So I guess brushing is kind of like writing, I guess. Pokeses, whereas putting on blush, mishum toves, for spinning. I don't know why exactly. Apparently you spin some kind of thread, but the blushes that I saw, those didn't really look like they were very thready. It looks like you just kind of have like, almost looks like, what's it called? Almost like water paint, I think. And then you just kind of like take, I think like also like some kind of a brush, and you just stick it in the paint, and then you just like, you kind of use this like paintbrush, which looks kind of fun, and you just kind of, and you just kind of like paint it on your face. Looks really fun. All right, great. Let's move on. Amru Rabbanan Kame to Rabbi Abos. Now the rabbi said to Rabbi Abos, "V'chiderech hariga b'chach, v'chiderech ksiva b'chach, v'chiderech tvia b'chach." Is this the way that people usually weave? Is this the way that people usually write? Is this the way that people usually spin threads? No, no, they aren't. So Ela Amar Rabbi Abos. Rather, says Rabbi Abos, "L'didi mefarish ali minei Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina." He says, "Look, I have my own inside information explanation of Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina. Kocheles mishum tzovas." Okay. Applying eyeshadow, the melacha would be coloring. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, I get that. Coloring, almost like painting, right? You like paint it on your eye. Okay. Godeles ufokeses, braiding and blushing, mishum bone. You're going to be chayav for bone. Now the Gemara says, wait, what does binyan have to do at least with braiding? So the Gemara says, braiding is connected to building. Kididarish Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya So when Shimon ben Menashe darshan, when it came to Adam and Chava, it says, "Vayiven Hashem Elokim hasatzela," that the Eibishter built the bone, the rib that he took from Adam, and he built it into Chava. It teaches that the Eibishter somehow made Chava into some kind of a braid epis, and then brought her to Adam. I guess he braided her into a person, but the point being that braids are connected to binyan. Okay, so Shekain Karche Ayam, according to Kalisa Ben Yasa, because in the cities of the sea, they call braiding building. So Vayiven, which is building, you could say means that he braided. Alright, very nice. Let's move on. Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, says the very, very holy Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Godeles, Kocheles, Ufokeses. Okay, so a woman who braids, who eyeshadows, and who blushes, so the atzma, if it's for herself, so then petura. Okay, but if it's the chaverta, if it's for a friend, well then chayeves, because you could do you can't do as good of a job for yourself as you can, when you're, because if you're applying it to your eyes or stuff, so I guess you can't necessarily see as well as if you're applying it to somebody else, then you can kind of be in control and see everything. Which I guess is not like cutting somebody else's fingernails like we saw yesterday, right? Cutting somebody else's fingernails, you'd be potter because you have better control on your own fingernails. Wow. Alright. V'chena Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, and similarly Reb Shimon ben Elazar would say, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, okay, Isha lo saivir srak al panea, mipnei shetzovas. A woman shouldn't put, I believe that's rouge. Now, I couldn't figure out the nafkamina between rouge and blush. Those seem to me very similar. Maybe if we have some people here who know the nafkamina, maybe this would be a good thing to know. Well, it would help us understand the Gemara at least. So, fine. So, a woman should not put rouge on her face because it's coloring. Okay? Very nice. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, acholev, somebody who milks an animal. V'amachabetz v'amagabin. Somebody who takes okay, I guess in the making cheese process, I'm no expert, but I have seen a little bit of how they make mozzarella cheese. I've seen that before. But basically what you do is you take milk or something, and there's all sorts of stuff that you do, I guess. But at one point I think you I don't know, maybe pour hot water. Somehow it becomes this watery kind of thing, and at some point you have to separate the curds from the whey or something like that. So those are those two things. So, mechabetz would be kind of separating out the whey just to get the curds, okay? And megaben would be collecting all the curds into cheese. Grogeris. So all these things. So cholev, mechabetz, megaben. The shear would be grogeris, as we know that is the shear of all food-related things on Shabbos. Hamechabed v'amerabetz v'arod dechalos devash. So somebody who sweeps a dirt floor, or somebody who puts water on the dirt floor to keep down the dust. The dust. V'arod dechalos devash, or somebody who takes down honeycombs, removes honeycombs. So shagag b'Shabbos, if he did it on Shabbos by accident, well chayev chatas. Well then you're going to be chayev a korban chatas. Okay, so tasmi daraisa. Hazid b'Yom Tiv lo ka'abayim divrei Reb Eliezer. And if he does it on purpose on Yom Tiv, so he'll get malchus. Because on Yom Tiv, the onesh, the punishment on Yom Tiv is different than Shabbos. Shabbos, obviously, there's kares, korban chatas, all that stuff. Yom Tiv, it's a lav, right? Meaning we essentially, we generally treat Yom Tiv and Shabbos in our minds, they're the same, right? They're basically very, very similar. You can cook, that's about the only difference. But that's in terms of malacha, right? The same malachas of Shabbos apply to Yom Tiv pretty much. The nafkameh, but the punishment is different. Shabbos, it's kares, that kind of stuff. Yom Tiv, it's a lav, which means that, if you're warned, whereas on Shabbos, if you get a warning and you accept the warning, you'd be chayiv misa. On Yom Tiv, if you get a warning, you accept the warning, we just give you a few little lashes. No big deal. No, actually, lashes don't sound that fun. Anyways, so that's Rabbi Eliezer opinion, right? So according to Rabbi Eliezer, these activities would be asur midoraisa. And I think it's referring to basically milking and then there's different cheese processes. The Chacham say, echad zeh ve'echad zeh eino ela mishum shvus, whereas the Chacham say, no, these are only midrabanan actually. Interesting. I wonder why. But okay, milking and making cheese would be midrabanan. Say it. Rav Nachman bar Guria, ikal in Narda. Very nice. So Rav Nachman bar Guria visited Narda. Narda, of course, was the town of Shmuel. And apparently it got destroyed at some point. As we saw in Daf Yud Aleph, I believe. But yeah. Bo minei. And they asked Rav Nachman bar Guria, Cholev mishum mai mechayev, amalu mishum cholev. Okay, so he said, if somebody milks an animal on Shabbos, what is he chayev for? So he says, oh yeah, you're chayev for milking. Okay. Mechabetz mishum mai mechayev, amalu mishum mechabetz. They said, what about, this separating the whey from the curd on Shabbos? What are you chayev for? He said, oh yeah, you'd be chayev for separating the whey from the curd. Okay. Megabin mishum mai mechayev, amalu mishum megabin. And for, collecting these cheese curds and joining together the cheese curds, what are you chayev for? He said, oh yeah, for joining together the cheese curds. Basically, he repeated to them what they asked him. And they basically responded, all right, you're useless. Your teacher clearly was somebody who just gathers reeds in the swamp, i.e. whoever taught you didn't know anything and therefore you don't know anything. So I guess Rav Nachman bar Guria was a little bit insulted, and he figured that maybe he would go and figure out what the answer is. So Asa Shal Bey Midrash. So he went to the Bis Medrash and he asked, Amrulei, and they said to him, Well, Cholev Chayiv Mishum Mefarik, that milking an animal you bechayiv for mefarik, for separating, which is tolada of dash, right? We said that dash is basically whenever you separate something from its source. So here also you are extracting, right? So you are extracting the milk from the animal. So you're going to be chayiv for dash. Well, mefarik, which is a tolada of dash. Mechabetz, when you separate the whey from the cheese curd. So chayiv mishum borer, you're going to be chayiv borer because you're separating out the bad from the good. Okie dokie. Megaben mishum mai chayiv mishum bona. And when you make cheese, you're going to be chayiv for constructing. I.e., when you take the curd, the cheese curd, and you connect them all together into cheese, so you are building the cheese essentially. Okie dokie. Hamechabed, somebody who sweeps his house, sweeps a dirt floor. Hamerabet, somebody who puts water down, I guess mops, kind of puts water down on the dirt floor to keep down the dust. Varoda chalos devash, somebody who takes down or separates like honeycomb or whatever. Okay. Shagag b'Shabbos chayiv chatas. So if he did any of these things on Shabbos, so he's going to be chayiv a korban chatas. Hazid b'yom tev lo ka'abayim divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So we said that for these things, Rabbi Eliezer says that if you do it by accident on Shabbos, you can be chayiv a chatas, and on Yom Tov you be chayiv malchus if you do it on purpose. Amar Belazar, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. So Belazar, right? That's Rabbi Elazar ben Pidas. So he says, what's the reason for Rabbi Eliezer? I.e., Rabbi Eliezer the Tana, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. Rabbi Elazar the Amora is explaining Rabbi Eliezer the Tana. Tichsiv, as the Pasuk says, Vayitpol also biyaris adavash. So it says by Yehona's son that there was some fight with the Plishtim, and Shaul said, no, nobody's allowed to eat anything, and if you do, then we got to kill you. So Yehona's son didn't know about this rule, and he got to this forest that was full of honey, and it says that he dipped his staff into the honey and then he ate from it. So it says Yairis Hadvash, the forest of honey. What does a forest have to do with honey? To say to you, just like a forest, if you pluck something from the forest, you will be chayiv a korban chatas. Well, also, so when it comes to a honeycomb, if you separate, if you cut a honeycomb and take part of it, well then you will be chayiv a korban chatas on Shabbos, according to Rabbi Eliezer. A meimar shara zilcha b'mechoza. Okay, so a meimar would allow you to mop your floors in mechoza. Amar, he said, time of my amar abanon dilma asila ashvuye gumis hachaleka gumis. So remember, Mechoza was where Rava was. It was a wealthy city, right? We've seen this a number of times, that the people of Mechoza were wealthy. Whether it was the clothes that they wear were sort of more city, cosmopolitan clothing, as opposed to like the farmers. We also saw, just even in terms of their porridge that they make, they have a lot more honey, and they were a wealthier area. And what Meimar was saying is that in Mechoza, you'd be allowed to mop the floors on Shabbos with water, because their floors were made out of stone. And therefore there was no concern that while mopping the floor and, while mopping the floor and adding water, so the issue with mopping the floor and adding water is that you're going to come la shvuye gumis, that if you have holes in the floor, so you might end up filling them in, which would be boneh, okay? Which would be considered like building your floor. So therefore you're not allowed to. However, in Mechoza they had stone floors. So you can mop the floors and, it's fine. You're not going to be filling in any holes, right? It's stone. So therefore it would be permitted to mop your floors in Mechoza. Rabba Tosva, Ashkechele Ravina, Dekam Mitztayer Me Havala. So Rabba Tosva saw that Ravina was not feeling well because there was all this dust in his house. So Va'amrila, Markshisha Breiderava Ashkechele Rav Ashi Dekam Mitztayer Me Havala. Some say it was Taka Markshisha Breiderava, founder of Ashi, who was uncomfortable because there was a lot of dust in his house. So Amalei, so he said to him, whether it was Markshisha Breiderava to Rav Ashi or whether it was Rabbi Tosfot to Ravina, but he said to him, Lo Savar Lamar, Lo Hadetanya, Harotzel Rabbis is Beso B'Shabbos, Maybe Arevim Le'amayim, V'ochitz Panav B'Zavizo, Yodav B'Zavizo, Ragel B'Zavizo, V'nim Tzabayis M'Shabbos Me'elav. Okay, I just read a lot. Let's read that again. Lo Savar Lamar, don't you hold Lo Hadetanya of the following brisa. Harotzel is based on Shabbos. Somebody who wants to basically mop his floor on Shabbos, or to add water to the floor to make sure that dust doesn't rise up, right? So basically here you had, whether it was Rav Ashi or Ravina, they were at home and they were uncomfortable because there was lots of dust in the house and they couldn't put down any water on the floor to keep down the dust, right? But apparently there's a brisa that says that if you do want to apply water to the floor to keep down the dust, well then, maybe arevim le'amayim, you take some kind of a container that has water in it, okay? V'rochetz panav b'zavizo, and what you could do is, you could wash your face in this corner, yadav b'zavizo, wash your hands in this corner, raglav b'zavizo, wash your legs in a different corner, v'nimtza abayis m'sabitz me'elav, and then me'ela, kilu, while you wash your face and your hands and your feet, so water is going to get on the floor. And the ma'isa, when it gets on the floor, it will keep down the dirt. So you can do it in such a manner. And I assume that it's because kilu, it's not also midoraisa to put down water on the floor. It's also to fill in holes. That would be boneh, but the reason why you can't put water on the floor is only a gezerah midirabanan, so that you don't come to boneh. But I guess washing your, saying that you're not allowed to wash your face so that you don't get water on the floor, so you don't come to boneh, would be like a gezerah l'gezerah. And therefore they say, you're allowed to do it sort of in the shinui dika way, in this not deliberate way, you'd be allowed to add water to the floor. Okay, fine. So Amalei lava datoi. So whether it's Rav Ashi or Ravina, he answered, oh wow, I didn't know this. Thanks, right? And then I guess they would be allowed to, I guess that was a neat trick to be able to get water on the floor to keep down the dirt. Tana, we learn in the Brisa, Isha chachama. Okay, if you have a woman who is a Tamida Chachama, my bet is Beisa b'Shabbos, she can basically wash the floors of her house on Shabbos. Kilu, she can, meaning if she wants to keep down the dirt from the floor on Shabbos, well, she can, as Rashi says, well, you can just she can wash cups in this corner, and she can wash other things in some other corner, and Memela, in the same manner, water will get on the floor and keep down the dirt, and that's fine. Ve'idna, however, nowadays, the Svir like Reb Shimon, Sharia fil l'chatchila. However, nowadays that we hold like Reb Shimon, interesting that it says nowadays, but okay, nowadays that we hold like Reb Shimon, that davar she'en miskabin is mutter, so then you can even just milchatchila, you can even what? You can even just put water on the floor, I guess. Right, where it says Rashi, Reb Shimon, the davar she'en miskabin mutter, v'amarabetz, right, somebody who's putting water on the floor, eno miskabin lahadbik offer beguma, he's not intending to fill up holes, what he intends to do is so that dust doesn't come up. If it happens to happen that maybe certain dirt fills up holes, and it would be mutter. Okie dokie, friends. You got to focus a little bit for the rest of the daf, but it's not too bad. I think if you put in just like basic focus, you should be okay. So atolish mi atzitz nakuv v'she'eno nakuv potter. What? I skipped an important word. I skipped a very important word. I skipped the word chayav, which basically divides up those two phrases and also changes. Okay, let's start again. New Mishnah. Hatolish me'atzitz nakuv chayav. Okay, somebody who. So what is an atzitz? An atzitz is a planter, right? Kilo, a pot. You have a pot and you have a plant in the pot. Okay. Now there's a difference between if the pot has a hole in it or if it doesn't. Now obviously the hole could be on the bottom of the pot, but even if the hole is on the side of the pot, okay? But so an atzitz nakuv, a pot with a hole in it, is just that. It's a pot with a hole in it. Now a pot atzitz she'eno nakuv, a pot that doesn't have a hole in it, means it's completely sealed, right? It's a pot. There's no holes in the pot. It's completely sealed. So an atzitz she'eno nakuv, a pot that doesn't have any holes in it, well, it's completely separate from the ground. It's its own, it's its own environment, kilu. And so the Mishnah is basically saying, so a pot that doesn't have any holes in it, and you pull out the plant from that pot, well, then you're not going to be chayav for tolesh because it's the pot, this plant wasn't connected to the ground at all. It was just in a pot. So that wouldn't be an issue of tolesh. The question really is, right, of uprooting something from the ground. The question really is, in atzitz nakuv, a pot, a planter that has a hole in it, and that hole can be anywhere, whether it's on the sides of the pot, the bottom of the pot. But it's easier, I think, to imagine if it's on the bottom because it's closer to the ground. But the point is that if you have a planter that has a hole in the bottom of it, a hole in it, well, then the question is, do we treat it as if now that plant that's in the pot is getting some kind of nourishment from the actual ground? Okay. And if it's getting nourishment from the ground, well then if you uproot the plant from the pot, you'll basically be uprooting the plant from the ground, which is what the Chachamim are saying. So atolesh me'atzitz nakuv. So somebody who takes a plant out of a pot that has a hole in it, chayav. So the Chachamim say you're going to be chayav because you're basically pulling a plant out of the ground. V'she'eno nakuv pater. But if the planter doesn't have any holes in it, well then this plant wasn't in the ground at all. It was in a pot. And if you're just pulling it out of a pot, you're not pulling it out of the ground, and you're pater. Reb Shimon pater bazeh or vazeh, and Reb Shimon says that either way you're going to be pater. Whether the pot has holes in it, whether the pot does not have holes in it, you're going to be pater. It's not considered like you're uprooting it from the ground. Says the Gemara. Rami le Abaye le Rava. So Abaye asks a kasha to Rava. Va'amrei la Rabbi Chia bar Rav l'Rav. Some say it was Rabbi Chia, the son of Rav, asked his father Rav. Okay, I guess Chia was like a name in the family, right? Because of course Rav's uncle was Rabbi Chia, and I guess he had a son Chia. Okay, fine. So what did they ask? What did Abaye ask Rava, or maybe it was Rav Chia asked his father Rav? What did they ask? So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. Reb Shimon poter bazeh o vazeh. So Reb Shimon says that whether the pot has holes in it, whether it doesn't have holes in it, makes no difference. If you pull out the plant from it, you'll be pater. Okay. Alma, so what do we see from there? Nakuv l'Reb Shimon kishe'eno nakuv mashvileh. So Reb Shimon treats a pot that has a hole in it in the same way that he treats a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. Makes no difference. A pot is a pot, as far as Reb Shimon's concerned. V'amenu. But we have a question on this. Reb Shimon Omer, okay, Reb Shimon says, Bein nakuv l'she'eno nakuv, okay, if you have a pot, whether there's a hole in it, whether there's no hole in it. Wait, what? Oh, I keep on skipping words. Ein bein nakuv l'she'eno nakuv, there is no difference between a pot that has a hole in it versus a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. Ella, the only difference is, l'hachshir zraim bilvad. When it comes to hachshir zraim, that's the only difference. What does this mean? So seeds, right, the pasuk says, Well, I mean, this is basically, I think where we learn out basically to hechsher tumah in general. Of course, we all know that in order for something to be able to be mekabel tumah, what's called muchshir lekabel tumah, it needs to get water on it. Now, so let's say you have a stalk of wheat, okay? Now, that stalk of wheat is connected to the ground. So, obviously water is going to get on that wheat as it's growing. It's going to rain, water is going to get on it. However, that's irrelevant. What's important is that once you separate the wheat from the ground, once you harvest it, at that point, if a dead sheretz would fall on the wheat, it would not become tameh. The wheat would not become tameh because no water has gotten on the wheat once it was harvested, once it was separated from the ground. In order for something to be muchshir lekabel tumah, it needs to get water on it once it's been separated from the ground. Okay. So the question is, if you have, let's say a wheat stalk, I don't know if you can grow wheat in a pot. I don't know. Let's just say that you can. So let's say you have a stalk of wheat and it's growing in a pot, okay? So here's the thing. If you have an atzitz nakuv, if you have a pot and it has a hole in it, and like the Rabbanan, we would consider this wheat, therefore, to be connected to the ground because there's a hole in the pot, which is making it considered, which is giving it like nourishment from the ground. Well then, if water gets on this wheat stalk, and then a dead sheretz falls on the wheat stalk, doesn't matter. The wheat stalk is still going to be tahor because it's connected to the ground. But if we say, but let's just say this pot doesn't have any holes in it, well then everyone agrees that it's not connected to the ground. And if it's not connected to the ground, well then if if water then gets on it, and then a dead sheretz falls on it, it will become tameh because it was muchshir lekabel tumah once water got on it because it's not connected to the ground. So that's the nafkamina. So even Reb Shimon agrees that when it comes to a pot that has a hole in it, even though normally he would say there's no difference between a pot that has a hole in it and a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. It's all a pot. It's not connected to the ground. But when it comes to hechsher zroim, with plants that are in pots regarding tumah, then he admits that if there's a hole in the pot, it would be considered connected to the ground. And if water gets on it, it will not be machshir, the wheat, lekabel tumah, because it's connected to the ground. So what is the question that we're asking? The question that we're asking is, on the one hand, it seems like Reb Shimon says that there's no difference between an atzitz nakuv and an atzitz she'eno nakuv. As the Mishnah says, Reb Shimon poter bazeh uvazeh. Reb Shimon says that both by an atzitz nakuv and an atzitz she'eno nakuv, right, a plant, a pot with a hole in it and a pot without a hole in it, you could pull something out of it on Shabbos and it wouldn't be considered tolesh. You'd be poter because it's neither one is considered like it's connected to the ground. However, yet he says regarding tumah that a pot that has a hole in it would be connected to the ground, and the plant that is inside of it would not be muchshir lekabel tumah if water gets on it. So on the one hand, we're saying Reb Shimon doesn't make any difference between an atzitz nakuv and an atzitz she'eno nakuv, but on the other hand, we seem to be saying that there is a difference according to Reb Shimon when it comes to hechsher zroim. So is there a difference? Isn't there a difference? What's pshat? So Amarle, so whether it was Rava responding to Abaye or whether it was Rav responding to his son Rav Chia, but he said to him, L'chomile Reb Shimon kitalush mashvi le. No. So regarding all things, Reb Shimon considers an atzitz nakuv, a pot with a hole in it, to be separate from the ground. V'shayni le'inyan tumah, but it's different when it comes to tumah, to hechsher zroim. Da'atorah Rib Satira Eitzel Zroim. Shenamar al kol zera zeru asher yizareah. Because the Torah itself came to say that a plant that is planted in a pot with a hole in it would not be muchshir lekabel tumah, would be tahor. Because it says zera zerua asher yizareah. It says the word zera 3 times to be very clear that they need to be seeds that have been taken out to be planted, but not seeds that have actually already been planted. Any seed that has already been planted, even if it is in a pot, but the pot has a hole in it, then it will be considered as though it's planted in the ground, and it will not be muksher lekabel tuma. So in general, Reb Shimon would say that a seed that's planted in a pot with a hole in it would nonetheless be considered as if it's separate from the ground. But because the Torah says zera, zerua, asher, yizarea, that it uses all these extra words of zera to say that we really, really need it to be a seed, an unplanted seed. Therefore, it's coming to say that once the seed has been planted, even if it is in a pot, but that pot has a hole in it, it will be considered planted in the ground, and it will be not muksher lekabel tuma, will not be able to contract tuma. But if it's in an atzitz she'eino nakuv, it's in a pot that doesn't have a hole in it, well then it will be considered separate from the ground because there's no connection between the pot and the ground, and therefore even that will not be muksher lekabel. No, will be muksher lekabel tuma because it is separate from the ground. All right, that was fun, right? Right. Let's go weiter. Okay, so a certain elder asked Reb Zera. Now, of course, there are opinions that say a certain elder is Eliyahu Hanavi. But okay, so a certain elder asked Reb Zera, Shoresh Keneged Nekev Mali Amar Reb Shimon. Okay, so remember, Reb Shimon said that if you have a pot, and whether the pot has a hole in it, whether the pot doesn't have a hole in it, if you take the plant and you pull it out of the pot, you will be potter because it's considered separate from the ground, and it's not like you are uprooting it from the ground. But this Ausava asked Reb Zera, Shorish Keneged Nekev Mali Amar Reb Shimon. What would Reb Shimon say, however, maybe in the case where the root of the plant is mamish right opposite the hole? Let's say the hole was in the bottom of the pot, and the root was mamish right opposite the hole, and right beneath the hole is the ground. So maybe in that case, Reb Shimon would say you'd be chayiv for uprooting it because the root is so close to the ground and mistama is getting some kind of benefit from the ground. Ishtik v'lo amalei v'lo midi, and Reb Zera didn't have an answer for him. Okay. Zimna chada ashkechet diyasav v'kamer. Now another time, however, this elder found Reb Zera who was sitting and he was giving a shir. What was he saying? Umode Reb Shimon shemnikev bichdei tairaso. That, however, Reb Shimon is moda, he admits to the Rabbanon that you would be chayiv for uprooting a plant from the ground if the hole in the plant, in the pot, was large enough bichdei tairaso, that an olive can go through. Meaning, if you have a kli cheres, right, in general, if you have a pot, any kli, any vessel made out of earthenware, okay, and it gets tameh, let's say a sheretz fell in it, okay, so now it's tameh. So how do you make it tahor? Who could tell me? Everybody knows this already, right? By breaking it. So if you put a hole in the kli, in the vessel, that could be one way of breaking it. But the hole has to be big enough, and we're going to learn all about these holes in just a few minutes. Don't you worry. So in order to be, you can't, if you just put like a tiny little hole, that's not going to make the kli, broken in order to say that now it's tahor. It has to be a big enough hole. And how big of that hole? An olive's worth is generally considered. We've also seen a pomegranate's worth. We're going to see. But for now, we're assuming it's an olive's worth, okay? So what Reb Zera is saying over here is that if you have a pot that has a hole in it, large enough that an olive can go through, i.e. large enough that it will be machshir, that if you have a kli that's tameh, it'll make it tahor, well then, at that point, the plant that is inside of the pot will be considered connected to the ground, and if you pull it out of the pot, you will be chayiv for tolish for uprooting it from the ground, and that is regardless of where the root is. Meaning, even if so let's say the whole of the plant is like, I don't know, at the bottom of the pot, but off, right, the whole of the pot is like at the bottom, but off to the side, let's say, and the root of the plant is like not even opposite that hole, it's like on the other side of the pot, let's say, still, we would consider the plant to be connected to the ground, and if you pull it out, you will be chayav for a tolesh, since the hole in the bottom of the pot is large enough that an olive can come through. Now, Hahu Sava was very disappointed. Amar le, Hahu Sava said to Reb Zera, Hashta shorish keneged nekev ba'imunach v'lo amart li v'lo midi. When I asked you when the root is mamish opposite the hole in the pot, and you didn't know the answer, well then obviously you shouldn't know the answer when, sure, even though the hole is large enough now that an olive can come through, but the root of the plant that we're talking about is not opposite that hole. It's opposite earthenware. It's opposite the pot, right? The hole's on the other side of the pot. And you're saying that in that case, Rabbi Shimon would say that you're chayiv for tolesh? When I asked you when the root is mamish opposite the hole, and you said you don't know the answer, what Rabbi Shimon would say. And in this case, just because the hole's a little bit bigger, but the root of the plant is like nowhere near the hole, it's mamish opposite clay. You're saying that if you pull that out, you're going to be chayiv because it's connected to the ground. Certainly, you should say there as well that you don't know the answer. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, V'itmar lehad Reb Zera ach Yehuda itmar. If you want to state Reb Zera's statement, you have to say it like this. Umodu Reb Shimon shemnikev lamata meravias. Oh, that what Reb Zera said is that if the pot got a hole in it so that it can no longer hold a revius of anything, right? If you right, meaning in order for something to be considered a kli, it has to be able to hold stuff in it. That's kind of the definition of a kli. If it gets a hole in it in such a way that it can't hold anything anymore, i.e. it's just bichlal not a kli, well then, at that point, Reb Zera would say, well, Reb Zera is saying that Reb Shimon at that point would admit that this kli is just, irrelevant, and it will be considered like this plant is connected to the ground, and even Reb Shimon would agree that you'd be chayiv. However, in a case where the kli would be able to hold a revius, even though there's a hole that's the size of an olive. So like, let's say, remember, as I said earlier, an atzitz nakuv can have a hole anywhere in the kli, right? Can have a hole on the side of the kli, right? So in a case where there is a hole that's large enough for an olive to go through, where the kli would become tahor if it was tameh, but at the same time it could still hold a revius, because let's say the hole was on the side of the kli, even like, higher up, so it'd still be able to hold a revius. Well, in that case, Reb Zera wouldn't necessarily say that Reb Shimon would say that you'd be chayiv for taking it out of the kli, because in that case, it's just an atzitz. Yeah, meaning just like Reb Zera didn't know the answer when the Hahu Sava asked him if the root was mamish opposite the hole. Well, then he also wouldn't know what would happen. What the halacha would be if the hole was like on the side of the kli. All Reb Zera was saying is that if the kli was damaged to such an extent that it's completely useless, well, at that point Reb Shimon would agree that we would treat it as though the plant is connected to the ground, and taking it out of the kli would be tolesh, and you'd be chayiv. Okay, Amar Rava, says Rava, Chomesh midos b'klei cheres. Oh, this is exciting. So Rava says that there are basically 10 different measures when it comes to a kli cheres. What does this mean? So of course, when it comes to kli cheres, so if it's tameh, so you'd have to break it in order to make it tahor, okay? So then what Rava is saying is that there are 5 stages, sort of brokenness of a kli, right? What happens if I puncture a tiny little hole in it? Will that make the kli tahor? Maybe yes, maybe no. So let's see. So Amar Rava, Chamish midos b'klei cheres. There are 5 different measures of, let's say, holes in earthenware vessels when it comes to considering them to be broken. Nikev kimotzi mashke, tarmilatame gistera. Very exciting. What's a gistera? Okay, a gistera is, let's say you have a jug, and it's made out of earthenware. And it falls on the floor and shatters, unfortunately, into a few different pieces. Okay. So, clearly it's not usable as a jug anymore. There's no question about that. But, maybe I could take that shard and I can use it for some other use. Let's say I have a leak in something, I can put it under the leak in order to catch the drops, meaning it might still be usable for other purposes. So at that point, we could still consider this shard to be its own kli. Okay? However, if that shard gets a little hole in it, enough that whatever liquids might go into this shard would now drip out the bottom through this little hole, well, at that point, this little shard is now completely useless. I mean, you had a bigger jug, the jug shattered into a few pieces, you said, okay, well, it was a good jug while it lasted. You know what, I may as well salvage this like scrap clay shards. I can use it for if I have some kind of a leak. But if that shard gets a little tiny hole that now, water is going to drip out of it, well, then you really have no use for it. And that gistra, that shard, will no longer be considered a kli. Once it gets that tiny little hole, that water will drip out of it. Fine. Right? So nikev kimotzi mashke, if the kli gets a hole in it, that water will drip out of it, well then tar militame gistra. Right? Well, at that point it'll be tahor from the tumah of a gistra, right? Meaning a gistra, this kli, this little shard, is able to become tameh, but once it gets a little tiny hole in it, then you really have no use for this shard anymore, and even that won't be able to be makabel tumah. It'll be completely useless. However, if you needed a vessel in order to mix together water with ashes of para aduma, as it says, right, mayim chaim el keli, you have to put you have to mix the ash with water in a kli. It would still be considered a kli that you can mix this water in, because if you have a vessel and has a little tiny hole in it, it's okay. It's still going to be considered a vessel. But nikev kikones mashke tar milikadish b'mechatas. However, if a hole gets in this kli, that now not only will water drip out of it, but even if you submerge this kli in water, water will get into it. I guess it has to be a larger hole in order for water to get into it, right? So if it's a tiny little hole, so water will drip out of it, but if you submerge it in water, you won't necessarily get water into the kli that way because the hole is too small. But if the hole expands and is large enough that if you submerge the kli in water, water will be able to get into the kli, which is a little bit larger, so at that point you will no longer be able to use this kli to create mei chatas. Fine. But vadayin kliu lachshe bozrai. But at this point, it would still be considered a kli, as we talked, a kli, a vessel, as we talked earlier about hechsher zraim, right? We said that if we have a plant in a pot, and the pot doesn't have any holes in it, well then the plant will be considered separate from the ground, and if water gets on the plant, it'll be mukhshar lekabel tumah. It'll be mukhshar lekabel tumah. So we're saying that if this earthenware vessel that has a hole in it that is large enough that water can come in it, then it still wouldn't be considered a hole regarding, to make it considered an atzitz nakuv, to consider it not mukhshar lekabel tumah for the plant that's inside of it. At this point, the hole would still be small enough to consider it an atzitz she'eno nakuv, to say that the plant would be mukhshar lekabel tumah because it's separate from the ground. Nikev kishorish kain. However, if the hole gets slightly larger, the size of a small root, well then tar milachsher bozraim. Well, at that point, it would be considered an atzitz nakuv, and any plants that are inside would be able to get nourishment from the ground, and would not be mukhshar lekabel tumah. Vadayin kliu lekabel bozesim. However, it would still be considered, if you could still put olives in this vessel, and because you could still put olives in this vessel, they won't fall out. So therefore, it's still considered a kli. So if you had like a kli cheres, and it became tameh, and there's a hole in it the size of an olive, the size of this small root, but olives wouldn't yet fall out of it, well then it would still be tameh. It wouldn't yet be tar, it wouldn't be considered broken. Nikev kimotzi zaysim. But if the hole becomes large enough, then now olives will fall out of it. Well then tar milekabel bozesim. Well then you can no longer fit olives in there, and therefore the kli would be considered tahor. And as Rashi points out, that's sort of the standard shi'ur for considering a kli to be tahor. Okay? That a regular old kli, that's for, a regular old vessel that you'll put food in and stuff, well if it becomes tameh and then you put a hole in it, or it gets a hole in it large enough that olives will fall out of it, at that point it would be considered tahor. However, v'adayin kliu lekabel rimonim. But if you had set aside this kli to be for pomegranates, which obviously are much larger than olives, well then the fact that it has a hole the size of an olive in there isn't gonna, make it not usable anymore. So it would still be considered a kli for pomegranates. But nikev k'motzi rimonim, if the hole gets large enough, then now pomegranates will fall out of it. Well, then tahor miklum. At that point, it's objectively tahor. If you get a kli made out of earthenware, it has a hole in it, the size that a pomegranate can fall through it, at that point, it would be considered tahor, certainly. V'imhukaf tzamid pasil ad shiv chazrubo. Now, if this kli cheres is, as we saw the other day, is sealed with a very strong seal, well, as we said at that point, if it's in an ohel ames, if it's in a house with a dead body in it, well, then we said if you have a kli cheres that has a seal on it, it's closed and it's sealed real good, well, then none of the tumah will get into the kli. But check this out. This is super interesting. If the kli has a hole in it, still no tumah will get into the kli. Isn't that interesting? Because, right, it says, does it say over here? Right, v'chol kli pasuach asher ein tzamid pasa alav tamiyu. It has to be pasuach. It has to be open up from the pesach. It has to be open up from its opening. But if you have a hole in the side of it, tumah won't get in from that hole in the side, right? Until ad shiv chazrubo. In order for tumah to be able to get into a hole in a kli cheres that is sealed, but has a hole in the side, the tumah won't get in unless the hole is large, the size of a majority, I guess, of the kli. Maybe the height of the kli, but it would have to be, the majority of the kli would have to have a hole in it. At that point, tumah would be able to get in. But otherwise, tumah won't get in, even if there's a hole, since it's sealed at its opening. Like at its main opening. Amar Ravasi, said Ravasi, Shamaiti, I heard, kli cheres shiur k'motzi rimon. 1 second. Ravasi says, Rava, you're giving all these fancy shiurim, right? Right, motzi mashke, machnis mashke, all sorts of stuff. Ravasi says, look, I heard that by earthenware, the shear is k'motzi rimon. That if a pomegranate could fall out, it's tar, otherwise it's tameh. Amalei Rava, shemelo shamaiti ela b'mukaf tzamid pasil. Rava says, no, maybe what you heard is only when you have a kli cheres that is completely sealed and it's an oel of a mace. That is where the shiur is of a rimon. I mean, if you have this kli cheres and it's completely sealed and you have a hole in the size of it that's the size of a pomegranate, maybe that's where you said, maybe that's the context where you heard that the shiur for a kli cheres to have a hole in it to become tameh would be a rimon, a pomegranate. But 1 second, didn't we just say a second ago that Rava says that when it comes to a kli cheres that's completely sealed, it's only able to get tumah inside of it from the hole in the side if the hole in the side is the size of its majority? Why is Rava saying now that it's the size of a pomegranate? So lokasha abirava bezutre. It depends. If it's a large kli cheres, well then the size of the hole on the side of it is going to be based on the majority of the size of the kli. However, if it's a small kli cheres, so then it would be the size of a pomegranate. Alright, that was Daf Tzadi Hey. It was like an interesting little journey, Daf Tzadi Hey. So at the beginning, we were talking about like taking up makeup. No, not taking out makeup, but like applying makeup, like what you're going to be chayav for. And then we talked about all sorts of things like milking and cheesing and sweeping and mopping and honeying. We talked about the different shiurim the different shiurim as well as what you're going to be chayav for when you do those things. We talked about planters, right? Planters that have holes in them, planters that don't have holes in them. The opinion of the Chacham is that if a planter is nakuv, it's an atzitz nakuv, if it has a hole in it, so then you'd be chayav for tolesh on Shabbis, for uprooting it from the ground. But if it's an atzitz she'eno nakuv, if it's completely separate from the ground, there's no holes, well then you would be patur, because you're not uprooting it from the ground. Whereas Reb Shimon says that both, if it has a hole in it, as well if it doesn't have a hole in it, you're going to be patur from tolesh because it's considered separate from the ground. He says that the only time when there's a difference between an atzitz nakuv and an atzitz she'eno nakuv is when, regarding to being machshir zraim the kabel tuma, in atzitz that is an atzitz nakuv, an atzitz that has a hole in it, the plant inside of it will not be able to be kabel tuma because it's considered connected to the ground. Okay. Rava then says that there are 5 different types of shiurim when it comes to a kli cheres to be considered to making it to consider it not to be usable anymore. So if you have a tiny little hole in it so that water will drip out, well then at that point, if you had a gister, if you had a shard of pottery that you were using just like as scrap shards to to collect water or something like that. Well, if you get a hole in it enough that water will drip out, well, at that point, that's not even usable for scrap pottery. If the hole is large enough that water can get into the kli, well, at that point, you would not be able to use it for mechatas anymore. That would not be considered a kli for mayim chaim al keli, but it still would be considered, it wouldn't be large enough to consider it to be an atzitz nakuv. It would still be considered an atzitz she'eno nakuv in terms of hechsher zrayim. But once the hole is large enough that a root, the size of a small root, well, at that point, it would be considered an atzitz nakuv, and the plant inside of it would no longer be muksher l'kabel tuma. Once the hole is the size of an olive, well, at that point, if it had tumas sheretz, if it was like a kli that you would put food in, well, at that point, once the hole is the size of an olive, it would be considered broken and not usable for food anymore, and it would be tahor. But if you decided either at that point or beforehand that you want to use this kli for pomegranates, well, if it has a hole the size of an olive, you could still use it for pomegranates, so it would still be tahor, tamei, until it gets a hole the size of a pomegranate. At that point, it's just objectively considered broken, and it will be tahor at that point. Then we talked about if you have a kli cheres that's completely sealed, it's sealed really strong, and it's in an oil amaze, so we know that the tumah will not get into it, even if there's a hole in the side of it, as long as the top of it is sealed. However, if that hole on the side is, it depends. If it's a large kli cheres, so if that hole on the size of a majority of the size of the kli cheres, so then the tumah will be able to get in at that point. And if it's a small kli cheres, so then if the hole is large enough that it's the size of a pomegranate, well then tumah will be able to get into the kli cheres. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Hey. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace out, friends.